Welcome to another edition of SDN TV News. I'm Leishan Stelter, Managing Editor of Security Director News, and I'm here with Bob Hellmuth. He's the Director of the Department of School Security and Safety for Montgomery County. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
I was hoping we could just start by talking about some of the challenges that you face.
Okay. We are undergoing right now a security initiative to completely upgrade our camera systems that we're using in our schools now for access control, electronic access control in our elementary schools, visitor management systems throughout our entire school district, and putting all of our alarms, changing them over onto a network system. So there's a lot of challenges we're facing. Right now, the challenges are not just financial, but also all of our vendors, getting them to work together, our integrators, our different softwares, our consultant, our in-house electronic people that are working with us, and maintenance people that are working with us to get this done. So there are a lot of challenges.
So you said before that you had formed a panel?
We did form a panel. When we first came up with the idea of what we wanted, we just weren't sure how we were going to get there. So we had to bring our IT folks in because they had to talk about what infrastructure we had, and to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish, what did we need to change. We had to bring an outside consultant in who had experience working with not just the security industry, but also working with educational systems. Educational systems are different than anything else in the entire world. So we got a guy in from St. Louis who has worked not only with universities, but he worked with 2 other public school districts. And so he's familiar with how school systems work. There was an extensive interview process that our IT people had to go through with this gentleman, and that we went through with this gentleman to see if he really understood what it is we were trying to do, and really had some ideas on how we were going to get there. It worked out very well for us. So he went out and he did a lot of research of different type of products. He brought several of the products in and let us try them. He made all the arrangements. He got the software companies together so that they could talk about how they were going to work everything together. He worked with an integrator, it turns out, that already had a contract with our school district. So we are now well underway towards working in this 6-year initiative of changing everything over in the school district.
And you had also mentioned there are some challenges as far as vendors were concerned, just getting certain vendors on board.
I think that there is. I think that sometimes it's probably not as challenging now because economic times have somewhat dried up some of the work in the private sector. And it's dried up some of the work probably in the public sector too because of funding issues. But in good times, economic times, we had vendors who weren't interested in bidding in the public sector. For a lot of different reasons, I think. I think that the bonding issue, I think that the paperwork that they had to submit, I think a lot of the oversight. I'm just not sure that they were making more money in the private sector. So it really limited our options as far as vendors went. And I'm talking mostly about integrators. Just weren't that interested.
If you could kind of come up with a security wish list, if you had the budget that you wanted, what are the most important security, elements?
Well, I think, we have to start with who's coming into our schools, so especially in the elementary school level, because we have security staff in all of our secondary schools. So all of our middle schools and high schools have dedicated security staff in them. Our elementary schools do not. And of course, these are the kids where the parents, really worry the most about their children, even though our school system is a very safe school district. But your access control and your visitor management system, so that you can control who comes and goes, and you actually have a great idea who comes and goes from your building all the time, I think that's very, very important. That's probably the most important at the elementary level. As we start moving into the secondary schools, that's where our camera systems become very important to us. We use our camera systems for a lot of things. And it's so much cheaper to install cameras than it is to go buy or to go hire additional security staff. But just from the cameras, you can see movement. You can see what halls all of a sudden are starting to get pretty crowded. And you can dispatch somebody down there to find out what's going on down that hallway that all of a sudden is getting crowded. You can start looking for trends. You can go back, and when something happens, you can go back and review the camera data and see what's going on and start looking at when you start having thefts, for example, if you're tracking thefts and you're looking specifically in a particular part of the building and particular times. If you're starting to see trends there, you can go back and you can review. Not only just the fights, but there's a lot of things that we use the cameras for. We've cut down our vandalism. We've cut down our number of thefts. To some extent, we've cut down on some of the fighting that goes on, and certainly we can identify who the aggressor is most of the time in a fight. We've used it for cases where we've had people say they've tripped and hurt themselves, and we were able to go back and look at the cameras and say, can we verify that this incident even happened? And we had one case where we couldn't verify it. This woman was insistent that she had fallen on a particular sidewalk at a particular time, and even claimed that she laid there and nobody came to her aid. And we were able to back the cameras up 2 hours before she said that this happened, and up to 2 hours afterwards, and nothing happened on the sidewalk where they claimed to happen. So there's a lot of things that we can use those cameras for.
And as far as camera installation goes, I know that it usually takes a pretty big backbone as far as having significant amount of bandwidth. Is that a concern? Is that something you're...
Well, it is a concern. If we're just viewing the cameras in the schools, we don't have a bandwidth issue. The bandwidth issue comes when we try to view them remotely. So if I'm looking at them from my office, if I bring up 70 cameras at a high school, we have some serious bandwidth issues. If we do it after hours, when we monitor the schools after hours from our central alarm center, we don't have a problem because we don't have 21,000 employees and 138,000 students all trying to access the internet. So we don't have that much problem after hours. We have also given a link to our camera systems to the county police department, and they can use it for legitimate law enforcement purposes. So if we had a serious situation during the daytime, they can access that school, they can call it up. If we get alarms in the school after hours where we actually call the police, they can call these cameras up and look down the halls. After hours is not a problem. During the daytime, what we have done is we throttled this back to 4 frames per second. It still gives us the definition we need and the detail we need, but it really cuts down on our bandwidth use.
Great. And the last issue I wanted to talk about was funding, which I know is always sort of the elephant in the room, not being able to secure the funding that you need.
Funding is a huge issue, and what I would say to anybody is, when you go seek funding, before you go, make sure you have a pretty solid plan. You need to talk about what it is you want, what it is that you hope to accomplish with it. What's the downside? Because there's always going to be a downside to everything. What's the positive? And then go in and present your plan. If it makes sense, normally you can at least get part of what you're looking for. We were very lucky because we have a superintendent and a COO who believe very, very strongly in secure environments. So they supported 100%. We were able to go to the county council and present a 6-year plan, and they accepted it. So we got an additional $9 million over 6 years to fund what we were looking to fund. So if somebody has $9 million to your budget, that's pretty good. Now, I got funding last year, and my funding's secure for this year. If the economic times don't turn around now, I'm not sure that when I go in for my 3rd installment next year that I'll still have it. But at this point, I expect to have it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good news, and I want to thank you for joining us here at SDN TV News. This is Leishan Stelter signing off from SDN TV News.